you and your whole association!
I sat in the courtroom with one hand resting on my father's old leather briefcase. Every seat behind me was filled. HOA residents, contractors, cabin buyers, reporters, even a county prosecutor stood near the back wall taking notes. Across the aisle, Vanessa Crowley looked completely relaxed. She wore a dark navy suit, a pearl necklace, and the same confident smile she had worn the morning her bulldozers arrived on my island. Her attorney, Miles Denton, stood before the judge and pointed toward me. "Your Honor, Mr. Mercer watched my clients invest more than $14 million into this project. He waited until all 26 cabins were finished, furnished, and ready for sale. Now he wants to take everything." A quiet murmur moved through the courtroom. Several cabin buyers turned and stared at me as though I were the criminal. The judge raised one hand, and the room fell silent. Then he looked directly at me. "Mr. Mercer, do you have anything that proves the island belongs to you?" I placed both hands on the briefcase. "Yes, Your Honor." Then I looked across the aisle at Vanessa. For the first time that morning, her smile weakened. "But the deed," I said, "is only the first thing they tried to bury." 6 months earlier, I was sitting on a wooden dock at Black Pine Lake with a cup of black coffee in my hands. The sun had barely cleared the pine trees. A thin layer of mist drifted across the water, turning the lake silver in the early morning light. That was my favorite time of day. No boat engines. No lawn equipment. No people shouting across the water. Just birds in the trees, the soft movement of the lake beneath the dock, and the kind of silence a man learns to appreciate after spending 32 years building roads and bridges for the Army Corps of Engineers. My name is Daniel Mercer. I was 58 years old, recently retired, and living in the same lakeside house Rebecca and I had purchased nearly 3 decades earlier. The island across from my home had belonged to my family since 1949. My grandfather bought those 11 acres after returning from the war. My father built a small one-room cabin there. Years later, Rebecca and I added a wooden dock along the eastern shoreline. We built it ourselves. I handled the measurements and framing. Rebecca insisted on driving half the nails even though she bent nearly every third one. She would laugh, pull the crooked nail out, and tell me engineers worried too much about perfection. Rebecca had been gone 4 years by then. Cancer took her slowly, but it never took her ability to think about other people. Before she died, she made me promise not to sell the island to developers. She wanted it preserved as a quiet retreat for veterans and their families, especially those who came home but never fully felt at home again. That morning, I was sitting on the dock we had built when the silence suddenly broke. At first it was only a low mechanical rumble beneath the birdsong. Then came the warning beeps of trucks backing up. Metal struck metal somewhere across the water. I lowered my coffee and stood. A bulldozer was crossing the old causeway that connected the mainland to the island. Behind it came 2 concrete mixers, an excavator, several flatbed trucks carrying prefabricated cabin walls, and more than 30 workers wearing yellow safety vests. Bright orange survey stakes had already been driven into the ground. For a few seconds, I simply stared. My first thought was that someone had taken a wrong turn. The Silver Pines development sat nearly a mile farther down the lake. Construction crews had been working there for months, building large homes behind stone gates and newly planted trees. But those trucks were not heading towards Silver Pines. They were driving straight onto my island. I stepped into my aluminum fishing boat, started the motor, and crossed the narrow channel. By the time I reached the shore, workers were unloading equipment. A woman stood near the water with a folder tucked beneath one arm. She wore white slacks, an expensive blue blazer, and sunglasses that probably cost more than my boat. She watched me pull onto the gravel without offering to help. "Can I help you?" she asked. Her tone made it clear she did not intend to help anyone. "I'm Daniel Mercer," I said. "I own this island." A small smile appeared on her face. Not surprise. Not concern. Amusement. Vanessa Crowley, she said. President of the Silver Pines Homeowners Association. She opened the folder and removed a polished development map. 26 numbered cabin lots covered nearly the entire island. A clubhouse was marked near the center. Walking trails cut through the pine trees. A new marina stretched across the eastern shoreline where Rebecca's dock stood. This property is listed as the Silver Pines recreational parcel, Vanessa said. We're beginning construction on our private lakeside resort. I looked from the map to the machines behind her. This island has belonged to my family since 1949. Vanessa tapped the map with one manicured finger. According to county records, the island was incorporated into the Silver Pines Master Development Plan several years ago. That is impossible. It has already been reviewed by planning and zoning. I pay the property taxes. That does not necessarily determine title. I have the deed. Her smile widened slightly. Then I suggest you speak to an attorney. I stepped closer. I suggest you remove every worker and every machine from my property. Several workers nearby stopped what they were doing and looked toward us. Vanessa did not raise her voice. She did not need to. You have family stories, Mr. Mercer. We have county records. I took out my phone and called the sheriff's department. I gave the dispatcher my name, the address, and the parcel location. I told her heavy equipment had entered private property and construction had begun without my permission. Vanessa listened to the entire call without showing the slightest concern. When I ended it, she turned toward the bulldozer operator and pointed at the shoreline. Clear that area first. The bulldozer started moving. Its blade was aimed directly at Rebecca's dock. I ran toward it. Stop. Two men wearing gray shirts marked community compliance stepped in front of me. One raised his hands. Sir, you need to stay outside the active construction zone. This is my land. Move. The bulldozer engine grew louder. I tried to step around them, but one shifted with me. Do not make this physical, Mr. Mercer. I pointed past him. That dock is private property. The steel blade dropped. The first support post snapped. The sound carried across the lake like a rifle shot. Then the blade pushed forward again. Boards cracked, nails tore loose, and the outer half of the dock folded into the water. I stood there while the place where Rebecca and I had watched hundreds of sunsets disappeared beneath mud, steel, and splintered wood. It took less than 30 seconds. Vanessa watched the entire thing without blinking. When the machine finally backed away, pieces of the dock floated near the shoreline. One plank still had Rebecca's faded blue paint along the edge. Vanessa closed her folder. From this moment forward, Mr. Mercer, entering this construction site will be considered trespassing. I looked past her at the excavator digging into my family's land. Workers had already begun measuring the first cabin foundation. That was the moment I understood this was not a misunderstanding. Someone had planned this, and whoever had planned it believed the paperwork would protect them. The deputy arrived 20 minutes later. By then the bulldozer had moved inland, and the remains of Rebecca's dock were drifting against the rocks. Deputy Harris was a broad-shouldered man in his early 40s. I knew him well enough to recognize his truck, but not well enough to expect him to take my word over a stack of official-looking documents. He stepped out, looked at the machinery, then at Vanessa. What's going on here? I answered first. They're building on my island. Vanessa opened her folder before I had finished speaking. This property is part of the Silver Pines Master Development. We have county-approved permits, access rights, and recorded title documents. Deputy Harris looked at me. Do you have paperwork showing ownership? Yes, I said. At home and on file with the county. Vanessa gave a small laugh. Then perhaps Mr. Mercer should retrieve it instead of interfering with an active construction site. I ignored her and pointed toward the broken dock. They destroyed private property before you arrived. Harris walked to the shoreline and studied the floating boards. Did you order that removed? He asked Vanessa. It was an unpermitted structure located inside the approved development footprint. It was my dock. She turned to me. You keep saying that. Harris exhaled slowly. I could see the problem forming behind his eyes. One side had heavy equipment, permits, a development map, and a lawyer's contact information. The other side had an angry property owner standing beside a destroyed dock. He was not going to decide title ownership beside a lake. This is looking like a civil dispute, he said. I can document the damage, but I cannot shut down permitted construction unless the county revokes those permits or a judge issues an order. Vanessa crossed her arms. Exactly. Harris looked at her. That does not mean you are right. It means I am not a title judge. Then he turned back to me. Daniel, go get certified copies. Recorder, assessor, tax office. Call an attorney. Do not try to remove equipment yourself. I nodded. Vanessa smiled again. She thought the conversation had ended in her favor. It had not. I drove directly to the county administration building. The recorder's office occupied the first floor of an old brick courthouse annex. A clerk named Linda searched my parcel number. Within minutes she found the deed history. My grandfather had purchased the island in 1949. A corrective deed had been recorded in 1953 to clarify the shoreline boundary. The property passed to my father through probate, then to me. There was no sale to Silver Pines. No transfer to Vanessa. No vote. No agreement giving an HOA ownership. Linda printed certified copies and stamped each page. I felt the first real sense of relief I had experienced all morning. Then she frowned at her screen. There is another filing attached to this parcel. What kind of filing? A quitclaim deed. The relief vanished. From whom? She turned the monitor slightly. According to the document, I had transferred the island in 2019 to something called Black Pine Land Trust. 3 months later, that trust had transferred the property to Crowley Lake Development LLC, Trevor Crowley's company. I stared at the screen. I never signed that. Linda looked uncomfortable. It is recorded. That does not make it real. No. But until a court says otherwise, it creates a cloud on the title. She printed the document. The signature at the bottom looked like mine. Not similar. Mine. The long downward stroke on the M. The tight loop in the D. Even the slight rightward tilt I had developed after injuring my hand years earlier. For a moment, I wondered whether I had signed something without understanding it. Then I saw the date. March 14, 2019. That was the week Rebecca had undergone her second major surgery. I had spent nearly every hour at St. Catherine's Hospital. I had not been sitting in a law office transferring an island. The notary acknowledgement claimed I had appeared in person before a woman named Helen Price. I had never heard of her. I took the certified copies and went upstairs to the tax assessor's office. The assessor's record still listed me as the owner. The tax map showed the entire 11-acre island under my name. I had paid every bill. No delinquency. No auction. No tax sale. No ownership change. The clerk printed 20 years of payment history. Then she noticed something strange. A second parcel number had been created 2 years earlier. It overlapped almost exactly with my island. The old parcel remained active and taxable in my name. The new one was labeled Silver Pines Recreational Parcel. Its mailing address belonged to Crowley Lake Development. I looked at the two maps side by side. Same shoreline. Same acreage. 2 parcels. 2 claimed owners. 1 piece of land. The clerk shook her head. That should not happen. Who created the second parcel? She checked the file. It came through an administrative boundary correction from planning and zoning. Who approved it? Ray Caldwell. The same man whose signature appeared on Vanessa's development permits. I went to the tax collector next. They confirmed I had paid the property taxes every year. The HOA had also paid a small amount on the newer parcel. The county had accepted tax payments from both of us for the same island. That did not make Vanessa the owner, but it gave her something she could wave in front of contractors, lenders, and sheriff's deputies. From there I walked to planning and zoning. Ray Caldwell was not available. His assistant gave me a copy of the boundary adjustment application. Trevor Crowley had submitted it. Miles Denton's law office was listed as the contact. Attached to the application was a signature authorizing the change. My signature again. I stood in the hallway holding 3 documents I had never signed, the quitclaim deed, the boundary adjustment, and the parcel correction. Each one supported the next. The deed justified the parcel. The parcel justified the permits. The permits justified the construction. It was not one mistake. It was a chain. I returned to the island just before sunset. Deputy Harris was still there completing his report. Vanessa stood near a temporary office trailer speaking with 2 contractors. I walked toward her and held up the certified deed. This is the recorded deed. My family's chain of title goes back to 1949. The county still taxes me as the owner. Vanessa looked at the first page, then checked the recording date. Recorded in 1987, she said. That's when it transferred to me. She reached into her folder and removed the quitclaim deed I had just discovered. Ours was recorded in 2019. That signature is forged. Then prove it. I was in a hospital with my wife on that date. Vanessa tilted her head. That sounds emotional. Courts prefer documents. I stepped closer but stopped well outside her reach. You know I never transferred this island. Her expression did not change. What I know is that Crowley Lake Development holds the most recent recorded deed. Deputy Harris approached us. I handed him the tax records and both deeds. He read them carefully. This definitely needs a judge, he said. Vanessa nodded toward the machinery. Which means construction continues. Harris looked at her. It means you continue at your own risk. For the first time, something flickered in her eyes. Only for a second. Then it was gone. Risk is part of development, she said. I looked again at the signature on the quitclaim deed. Whoever created it had not guessed at my handwriting. They had copied it from somewhere. A loan application. A refinance file. A permit. Something private. By the time I drove home, one fact was clear. Vanessa was not relying on a simple boundary error. Someone had built a paper version of my island. And in that version, I had signed my own land away. By the next morning, Vanessa had turned my island into a fortress. A 10-foot chain link fence stretched across the causeway. Fresh signs hung every 20 feet, private construction site. Authorized personnel only. Violators will be prosecuted. One sign had my name printed across the bottom. Daniel Mercer is not authorized to enter. I stood beside the road reading it twice. There is a particular kind of anger that comes from seeing your own name used against you. It is different from being insulted. An insult is only noise. A printed notice looks official. It tells strangers someone else has already decided who is right. A white envelope was taped to my mailbox. Inside were 4 documents from Silver Pines. The first was a trespass warning. The second demanded $750 for delaying construction. The third charged me for the emergency removal of an unpermitted dock. The fourth accused me of threatening workers with physical violence. I read that sentence again. I had shouted at a bulldozer operator to stop destroying my property. That was all. Now on paper, it had become a threat. I called Mara Ellison. Her name had been given to me by a retired county engineer I trusted. She handled title disputes, forged transfers, and land development fraud. I expected to leave a message. She answered on the third ring. Tell me exactly what happened. I gave her the short version. When I mentioned the 2019 quitclaim deed, she interrupted me. Do not confront anyone again until I see those documents. They're tearing up the island. I understand. No, you don't. There was a pause. Then her voice softened. You're right. I do not understand what that island means to you. But I understand what Vanessa wants. She wants you angry, loud, and standing close enough to a camera that she can turn you into the danger. I looked across the water. Workers were unloading lumber near Rebecca's garden. What am I supposed to do? Sit here. You document, you preserve evidence, and you do not give them the one thing they cannot manufacture themselves. What's that? A real crime committed by you. That sentence stayed with me. An hour later, I saw an excavator moving near the center of the island. Rebecca's memorial garden was there. I told myself to wait for Mara. Then I saw the stone bench tilt sideways beneath the machine's bucket. I was in my boat before I had made a conscious decision. The motor carried me across the channel in less than a minute. 2 security men met me at the shoreline. They wore gray shirts with community compliance printed across the chest. One had a body camera clipped near his shoulder. Another camera stood on a tripod beside Vanessa. She had been expecting me. I stepped onto the gravel. I'm here to collect personal property from the memorial garden. One guard raised his hand. You are not permitted beyond this point. That garden belonged to my wife. Vanessa walked toward us. She wore cream-colored trousers and a red jacket as though she had arrived for a television interview rather than a demolition. There is no memorial garden on the approved site plan, she said. It existed before your plan. So did a great deal of overgrowth. Behind her, the excavator pulled up a patch of earth and wildflowers. Rebecca had planted those flowers during the last spring when she was still strong enough to kneel in the soil. Purple coneflowers. Black-eyed Susans. Wild lupin. She used to say formal gardens looked like they were afraid of life. She wanted flowers that spread wherever they pleased. Now they were tangled in the teeth of an excavator bucket. I moved forward. Both guards blocked me. Stand aside. Sir, do not make this physical. Vanessa glanced at the tripod camera. Daniel, you are already under investigation for threatening our contractors. That complaint is a lie. Then I'm sure your behavior today will support that. I looked beyond her. The stone bench Rebecca and I had placed beneath the largest pine tree lay broken in two. Her name had been carved across the back, Rebecca Mercer, a safe harbor in every storm. Half the inscription had split away. Something inside me tightened. I took one step toward Vanessa. The guard on my left placed his hand near the cuffs on his belt. Vanessa smiled. Go ahead, Daniel. Show everyone what kind of man you really are. That was when I noticed the second camera hidden inside the open door of the construction trailer, pointed directly at us. They did not want me to leave. They wanted me to push past a guard. They wanted me to touch Vanessa. They wanted a clean piece of video they could show a judge without the destroyed dock, the forged deed, or the broken memorial anywhere in frame. Mara had been right. I forced my hands open. I had clenched them without realizing it. Then I took a step back. Vanessa's smile changed, only slightly, but I saw the disappointment. I looked into the camera. I think everyone can already see what kind of man I am. Then I turned to Vanessa. I'm the man who called his lawyer before you called your cameraman. One of the guards looked away to hide a reaction. Vanessa's face hardened. You have 5 seconds to leave. I want the personal items from that garden. Anything inside the development boundary is subject to removal. You mean destruction? I mean progress. As I turned toward the boat, I saw a small metal box half buried in the mud near the broken bench. The excavator had torn it out of the ground. I recognized it immediately. Rebecca had placed it beneath the bench during our 20th anniversary. I stepped toward it. The guard blocked me again. That box belongs to me. Vanessa glanced down. It is construction debris. I took out my phone and began recording. That is a sealed personal container from my wife's memorial. I am asking for it in front of witnesses. Vanessa looked at the cameras, then at the guards. She knew refusing would look worse than surrendering it. Give it to him. One guard pulled the box from the mud and handed it over. The metal was bent along one edge. Mud and diesel oil covered the lid. I carried it back to the boat without another word. At home, I cleaned the box on my workbench. Inside were several photographs, a dried flower, and 3 letters Rebecca had written for me. 2 were soaked beyond saving. The third had been protected inside a plastic sleeve, but one corner was torn. I unfolded it carefully. Most of the letter was personal. Rebecca wrote about our son Luke and the life we had built beside the lake. Near the bottom was a sentence I had forgotten. One day, when you are ready, make this island a place where people who carried too much can finally set some of it down. I sat alone in the workshop for a long time. Then Mara called. I pulled the notary information, she said. The woman listed on the 2019 quitclaim deed was named Helen Price. Do you know where she is? Yes. Something in Mara's voice told me the answer was not simple. She died 8 months before the date your deed was supposedly notarized. I looked at Rebecca's damaged letter on the bench. So the deed is fake. It is strong evidence, but we need more than one impossible date. They will claim a clerical error, a delayed acknowledgement, or a corrupted scan. What do we do? We prove the whole chain was manufactured. The deed, the parcel correction, the boundary adjustment, the permits. Through the workshop window, I could see the excavator moving again. How long will that take? Longer than either of us would like. They can destroy the entire island by then. I'm filing for an emergency injunction. I closed my eyes. And until the hearing, she said, you stay away from Vanessa. You photograph everything from your property. You save every notice. You do not cross that fence. I looked down at Rebecca's letter. Vanessa thought the broken garden would make me reckless. Instead, it gave me something colder than anger. Purpose. That evening, Silver Pines sent an email to every resident. The subject line read, Unstable landowner disrupts community improvement project. It described me as aggressive, confused, and emotionally attached to land I no longer owned. Attached to the email was a photograph. It showed me standing 3 feet from Vanessa with both fists clenched. The hidden camera had captured the exact second before I stepped back. The broken memorial was outside the frame. So were the guards. So was the excavator. Vanessa had not gotten the crime she wanted. But she had gotten the picture. By the time Mara filed for the emergency hearing, half the community had already decided I was dangerous. The hearing was set for Friday. That gave us 3 days. 3 days to convince a judge that the paperwork Vanessa was using to justify a $14 million construction project had been manufactured. 3 days while the machines kept moving. From my side of the lake, I watched trucks arrive before sunrise and leave after dark. Portable floodlights appeared along the shoreline. Crews began pouring concrete long after most construction sites would have shut down for the evening. Vanessa was accelerating. She knows the hearing is coming, Mara said. She wants as much of the project in the ground as possible before we get in front of the judge. On Thursday afternoon, Mara came to my house with 2 banker's boxes full of documents. We spread everything across the dining room table: my recorded deed, the corrective deed, 20 years of tax receipts, the quitclaim deed carrying my forged signature, the second parcel record, the boundary adjustment approved by Ray Caldwell, the recreational agreement Vanessa had shown Deputy Harris. Mara tapped the agreement. This is the document they will lean on hardest. It had been signed in 1976 by my father and the original Silver Pines developer. It allowed residents to cross the causeway twice a year for community picnics. That was never an ownership transfer, I said. I know. But the copy they filed uses language about continuing recreational access. They are going to argue that the island was always intended to serve the development. They're building houses, not holding a picnic. That is our argument. But emergency hearings are narrow. The judge will not decide the entire title case tomorrow. We only need to show enough risk to preserve the property. I looked out the window. The first concrete foundations were already visible through the trees. And if we fail? Then the judge may let them continue until the full trial. The courthouse was crowded the next morning. Vanessa arrived with Miles Denton, Trevor Crowley, Ray Caldwell, and 3 representatives from the construction lender. I arrived with Mara and 1 banker's box. The difference was not subtle. Judge Nathan Aldridge entered shortly after 9. Mara spoke first. Your Honor, this is not a routine boundary disagreement. Heavy construction is occurring on land my client has owned and paid taxes on for decades. The defendants rely on a quitclaim deed he denies signing, notarized by a woman who was already deceased. Judge Aldridge looked toward Miles. Is that accurate? Miles stood. The notary date appears inconsistent, Your Honor. We believe it is a clerical issue arising from digitization. It does not invalidate the underlying transfer. Mara handed the clerk the death certificate. The notary died 8 months before Mr. Mercer supposedly appeared before her. Miles barely glanced at it. The acknowledgement may have been attached later. That question requires discovery, expert review, and testimony. It cannot be resolved through speculation at an emergency hearing. He made fraud sound like an accounting inconvenience. Mara presented my certified deed and tax records. She explained the duplicate parcel numbers and the fact that the county had collected taxes from me while issuing permits to Crowley Lake Development. Miles responded that tax payments did not determine title. He was legally correct, and he knew it. Then Ray Caldwell took the stand. He testified that the second parcel had been created to correct a historic mapping inconsistency. Were you aware that Mr. Mercer was still being taxed as the owner? Mara asked. I do not supervise tax collection. Did you contact him before approving the boundary correction? The application contained his authorization. The authorization carrying the same signature as the disputed deed? Miles objected. Judge Aldridge sustained it. Mara changed direction. Did you independently verify Mr. Mercer's signature? No. Did you speak to him? No. Did you inspect the original deed? I relied on the recorded documents provided by counsel. Counsel meaning Mr. Denton? Ray hesitated. Yes. Miles then presented the HOA's side. He described Silver Pines as a planned lake community that had relied on the island for recreational access for nearly 50 years. He presented building permits, environmental reviews, financing commitments, contractor agreements, and architectural plans. Then he showed the judge photographs of partially completed foundations. More than 100 workers and subcontractors are relying on this project. A total shutdown would cause immediate and substantial economic damage. Mr. Mercer has known about Silver Pines for decades. He did not object to the community's recreational use. Only now, after millions have been committed, does he claim fraud. Whatever dispute exists should be resolved through an orderly trial, not by destroying a major development through an emergency injunction. When both sides finished, Judge Aldrich removed his glasses. For several seconds he said nothing. Then he looked at Vanessa. "I have serious concerns about the notarization issue." Vanessa's expression did not change. He looked at Ray Caldwell. "I am also concerned that a county boundary correction was approved without direct confirmation from the person whose property was supposedly being altered." Then he turned to Mara. "However, the court cannot determine the validity of competing title documents today. That will require forensic examination, discovery, and a full evidentiary hearing. The request to halt all construction is denied." Vanessa released a quiet breath. Trevor leaned back in his chair. Miles began closing his portfolio. Judge Aldrich raised one finger. "I am not finished." The room went still. The defendants are requesting permission to continue construction on land whose ownership is actively disputed. If they choose to proceed, they will do so entirely at their own risk. He looked at Miles. "No cabin may be sold, transferred, occupied, or used as collateral before the title trial." Miles stood again. "Your Honor, the lender requires continued progress. As a condition of further construction, the Silver Pines Homeowners Association and Crowley Lake Development will deposit $1,500,000 into a court-controlled escrow account." Vanessa's head turned sharply toward Miles. For the first time that morning, she looked afraid. "The funds," Judge Aldrich continued, "will serve as security for remediation, removal costs, environmental restoration, and other damages if the plaintiff prevails." Outside the courtroom, reporters gathered around Vanessa. She smiled for the cameras and called the ruling a victory. "The judge refused to stop construction," she said. "Silver Pines will continue moving forward." She did not mention the escrow. She did not mention that the cabins could not be sold. She did not mention that the court had questioned her deed. Mara and I watched from the courthouse steps. "If they can't sell anything, why keep building?" I asked. "Because stopping would expose them." "How?" "The HOA's reserve filings claim they have more than $3 million available. If that is true, the bond will hurt but it will not destroy them. And if it is not true, then she has just been ordered to produce money that does not exist." We found out how desperate she was 2 days later. Silver Pines residents received an emergency special assessment, $4,000 per household. The email claimed the money was needed for critical community expansion obligations. At the same time, the HOA postponed repairs to an aging water line, canceled the clubhouse roof replacement, and emptied several maintenance accounts. Construction did not slow. It doubled. Night crews arrived. New floodlights illuminated the island until 2 in the morning. Concrete trucks crossed the causeway in a continuous line. Vanessa had not accepted the judge's warning. She had taken it as a deadline. "I tried to stop them," I told Mara over the phone as I watched another truck cross onto the island. "You did?" "The court warned them." "Yes. And they are still building." Mara was quiet for a moment. "Then from this point forward, every dollar they spend is evidence of a deliberate choice." Vanessa believed that once the cabins were finished, the project would become too large, too expensive, and too politically embarrassing for any judge to undo. She thought concrete created ownership. She thought momentum could replace a deed. "So I let them keep spending. Not because I agreed. Not because I surrendered. But because after the sheriff, the recorder, the assessor, the certified notices, the injunction request, and the court's warning, every nail they drove became evidence. For the next several weeks, I became the easiest man in Black Pine County to underestimate. Every morning, I followed the same routine. I made coffee before sunrise. I walked down to the shoreline. I checked the weather, watched the crews arrive, and then went back to whatever ordinary task I had planned for the day. I cut the grass. I repaired an old boat trailer. I replaced 2 rotting boards on my porch. From the island, I must have looked defeated. Inside my house, the dining room no longer looked like a dining room. Mara had turned it into a case file. The table disappeared beneath survey maps, tax records, certified letters, photographs, contractor lists, permit copies, and a large calendar marked with every significant date. We began by identifying everyone with money or labor tied to the project: Silver Pines HOA, Crowley Lake Development, the general contractor, the concrete company, the electrical subcontractor, the plumbing company, the construction lender, the title insurer, the investment fund, the architectural firm, even the company installing the prefabricated walls. Each one received a certified notice. Title to the island was actively disputed. The recorded quitclaim deed was alleged to be forged. The court had warned that continued construction would occur entirely at the defendant's risk. Any party proceeding after receiving notice might be exposed to claims for willful trespass, damages, and removal costs. We did not ask them to believe us. We made sure they could never say they had not been warned. I also documented the project from my side of the lake. Every morning I photographed the island from the same 3 locations. A white marker on my porch railing helped me keep the camera angle consistent. That allowed us to compare the work day by day: the first wall frame, the first roof truss, the plumbing trenches, the underground electrical lines, the removal of additional trees, the expansion of the temporary access road.